Hey everyone, and welcome to our first episode of our new in-house program, Spoiler Alert, where we give you an inside look at what's happening in Need for Speed No Limits. Now, spoiler alert, of course, we're going to give you some spoilers, but also, mod shop, cars, spoilers and stuff. I know the players are understanding. You guys get me. You know where we're coming from. So anyway, I'm your host, Sean. You've probably seen me in some other media here at Fire Monkey Studio. And with me, my amazing co-host, Alana. Alana, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Sean. I'm really excited to be back. I'm doing another series with you. It's always so much fun. And in particular, this one I'm super excited about because we are going to give our players some really cool behind the scenes looks into our beloved Need for Speed No Limits game. So yeah, super excited for this one.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. This is a great, first episode. And I think, we've got some other special guests here that we'll get to momentarily. But first, we're going to give some players a little bit about what they can expect in this newest update, which we are titling The Brothers of Blackridge.
Yeah, so we're kicking off our update with Chris and Isabella. So we've got some payback. We've got a new breakout special event coming, and players can earn the Aston Martin V12 Vantage S in this event.
Yes, very cool car, the Aston Martin. And then, respect and power also await players in the newest proving grounds where they can earn the awesome Alfa Romeo 8C.
Yes, and also another great thing, we're bringing back a car series. We have a brand new car series, which is exciting. And we know our players have been asking for this a lot. It's called the Fast Team Pack, and it includes the Mitsubishi Evolution X and the Honda S2000.
Yeah, now Fasty Impact, I believe, is a play on words. And unfortunately, the designer who came up with that is not with us today. But, anyone who's got questions about that, hit us up on Twitter or Reddit and we'll see what we can find out. So the other thing that's really, really exciting about this episode is that we are kicking off this update in this episode. We're kicking off a new storyline with some new characters and awesome new car wrap. So joining us today to talk about this and give us a little bit of an in-depth about what's going on, we've got Matt and Darren. So guys, thanks so much for being here.
Cheers, thanks for having us.
So I do want to give a little bit of introduction to you guys. Let you guys introduce yourselves, but I also kind of want to get Alana, let her introduce herself. So I want to just ask just real quick. I think first of all, Alana, what music are you listening to these days?
Oh, these days I am a bit of a mix. I listen to a lot of Australian music because that's where we have our festivals and gigs. That's who can really perform at the moment. But I have been really getting into disco, but like a new disco and soul music. That's been a real pleasure of mine. But I also like a bit of tech house and alternative indie. So a big mix all over the place.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And Need for Speed, we have so much, music is a huge part of the game. So I thought, it's a good icebreaker here.
Yep.
And then, okay, Matt is a designer, one of our awesome, talented designers here on Need for Speed No Limits. Matt, what do you listen to these days?
Usually a little bit of everything, very similar to Alana. I am a very big sort of metal fan. So anything old or new, especially Australian sort of metal. There's a band called Polaris that I really love listening to. But I'm always keen for anything that's interesting and I can listen to. I'll be on it for sure.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So who would you like to see join us in Need for Speed No Limits if money was no object?
If money was Metallica.
Oh,
Classic thrash Metallica would be fantastic. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, the Ride the Lightning update.
Yeah, get in on it. Yeah.
And Darren, you've joined us before on some of our other stuff. One of our very incredibly talented artists here at Need for Speed No Limits. Darren, what are you listening to these days?
I listen to a fair bit of lo-fi hip hop. So for the people that don't listen to that, it's kind of like the beats behind hip hop songs without the words. And I do that because it's just a bit easier for me to listen to when I'm doing artwork or trying to think. And I've also listened to quite a lot of film scores. There's a movie called Baby Driver. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Such a good soundtrack. Like I can listen to that like all the time. It's so funky. So yeah, I've been listening to that a lot.
Nice, very cool. So who would you sky's the limit? Who would you like to see in Need for Speed No Limits?
I have no idea. Like I'm pretty bad with the artists. But if I heard the song, I'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's get that in the game.
Sean, what are you listening to? What is your go-to on a Friday night?
Oh, well, I actually do listen to a wide variety of stuff, and I'm like way older than everyone. So, I listen to stuff like, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, kind of my jam. But what I've been listening to lately, the last week or so, is DMX,
Oh, yeah, true.
Revisiting some DMX.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Yep. Yeah, I used to listen to him a lot when I was younger. And I used to listen to him a lot before going to the gym to go to just pump myself up.
Oh yeah,
Hype.
super hype.
So aggressive, that music.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, I think we've got some questions, and Alana, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So, Matt, I have my first question for you today.
Oh, okay,
Can you give our players a bit of a rundown of this new event? So, what's the story, and what do the players earn when they complete the event? And can you also tell us about this really cool new car app, the Oni car app that is coming to the event?
Yeah, absolutely. So the new event we've got coming is called the Brothers of Blackridge. And as Sean said at the top of the show, it's a brand new story arc that's coming to Need for Speed No Limits. We really wanted to sort of focus back to the traditional street racing tuner culture kind of vibe. For me, especially, I grew up, playing like Underground and things like that. So those sort of street racing sort of vibes is what we wanted to capture here. I guess the plot line of it is that Kim hears about a new racer who's undefeated on the scene, and she grabs the player to go and investigate who it is, and they discover that this new racer's name is Rio. So they spend some time together, and later on in the event, Rio finds that there's a tournament happening, but unfortunately they need a third member to join their crew, but luckily he's got just the person to join them, which is his younger brother, Hiroshi, and he sort of drags him into it somewhat reluctantly. Hiroshi isn't as outgoing as Rio is, but as the trio sort of go and they go into the tournament, you meet some familiar faces, and yeah, just wanted to introduce them and kick off this street racing sort of arc.
Awesome. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. It's definitely something we want to revisit and go back to. We've had a lot of sort of grandiose sort of story arcs in like the last few updates, and we wanted to sort of kick off a new one with something a little bit more, to like the roots of what Need for Speed, started as and what it is about. So if the players manage to complete the event, they can earn themselves the Honda Integra Type R, which is a classic street racing car. And as you said, the wrap is a unique wrap for the Integra, and it's the Oni wrap. And I think Darren was the artist behind it. Maybe he can delve a little bit more into what it represents and what it's about.
Yeah, so the Oni is in Japanese folklore is a demon / troll, and they're pretty popular in like animes if you ever watch any of those. And I've been personally wanting to do one for a while. They're pretty kind of cool, and some of them are a bit on the cheekier side, which I thought was pretty complementary to the dynamic of the brothers. So I mixed the Oni illustration with graphic design sensibilities that are similar to the style that if you have a look at Japanese publications, they tend to have a lot of crowded elements on the page, and it's quite different in tone to Western tastes. So I wanted to kind of incorporate that into the bonnet. And the other thing I wanted to deal with the wrap was slightly altering the perceived shape or design of the Honda Integra. Some of the people mentioned that the car looked quite dated. Personally, I don't mind it at all. I actually really like the nostalgic factor, and all I have to see is that little, red H. I know it's a bit of a rocket. Yeah. But in terms of styling, it's definitely got that 90s sensibility to it, just the angles of things, the size of the intakes and that. So I used some graphic shapes to kind of trick your eye into something a little bit more streamlined. When you see, for instance, like a big black shape at the edge of a panel, your mind kind of instantly kind of recognizes or reads it as a cutout. So it gives the car a bit of a slightly different character. Some purists will definitely hate it, but I'm hoping a lot of the other people will dig it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the artwork, will be kind of shown alongside this. You players will be able to kind of get a hint of what that looks like. The artwork that you put forth for like key art and everything, it looks awesome. So we can't wait for players to like drive in, jump into the event and drive the car and get this stuff. So we got this new storyline coming on. So I think one of the things I'm interested in knowing is, Matt, for you. So how do you go about coming up with these storylines? Like, how are they developed? Like, what kind of research goes into that kind of thing?
Well, it's usually a team effort by all the designers on the team. We usually come up with an initial sort of concept or idea that we'd want to see, fleshed out within the game itself. And usually we have an idea of where that arc is going to lead. So our arcs usually contain, 8 to 10 events, and we'll know where the start of it will be and where it will ultimately finish. But we have to really work together closely to figure out what the meat of the sandwich is, if you will, and like how we will fill it out. A good example is with the Dust Howlers arc. We knew that Rook and the Dust Howlers, we knew exactly how that would pan out ultimately, but finding out, what sort of adventures they would have on the way, that was really a challenge, but it's something that we love doing. We love to try and do as much interesting stuff in our events as we can. We don't want just to be just about driving. We know there are some players out there who really love diving into the characters and things like that, so we do and try and expand on them as much as possible. It usually takes us a few passes to try and get feedback from, the other designers. Myself and Jake, who's not here today, unfortunately, we have very different sort of writing styles and how we want things to pan out. So it takes us a few times to sort of bounce things back and understand where we're heading. But ultimately, we usually find a pretty good middle ground that we're happy on. Just one last thing as well, the car itself can impact the event sort of when it comes out. We try and tie in a car with the event that makes sense. A good example is in the Dust Howlers arc, again, we had the Aston Martin DB11, and we had a spy sort of undercover event near the end of that arc, so we thought that's like a perfect fit. So yeah, there's a little bit of that, trying to find where these cars will live ultimately, because once they go in the vault, they're sort of there forever. So yeah, we just want to make sure it's right.
Yeah, so just real quick as a follow-up, so do you have the entire storyline of these two brothers? Do you know where it's going to end up?
Yeah, I mean, we know roughly where they will end up, down the line. We have some ideas about what will happen to each of them, and sort of the journeys they will take. But this can also change. That's the brilliant thing about design is it's a flowing sort of process, and you get a lot of feedback from people. You might hear an idea around the studio and think, actually, that's a great idea. I might sort of work that in. So yeah, we know where they'll end up ultimately, but how they get there is still a little bit up in the air. So it's great. We love listening to player feedback as well. We know there are some characters out there that the players really are drawn to, like Gary. Gets a lot of talk about on our socials. So we love fleshing out those characters when we can, and giving the players what they want.
Oh yeah, we just so players out there know, we here at the studio we're really enjoying Deep Fake Gary today. It was good.
Incredible.
That's really interesting. I love hearing about the backstory of these characters. And without giving too much away, could you give us a bit more of Ryo and Hiroshi's backstory and how integral they are to this storyline?
Yeah, so I guess first of all with Ryo, he's more of a confident, loyal sort of character. He's almost a bit protective, especially of his older brother. You get the vibe that he could have been maybe a street racer somewhere else in the past, but has come to Blackridge now for reasons that you're not sure of. But he's a very, very talented street racer, and he would do anything for his family and friends. Whereas on the flip side, Hiroshi is a bit more unsure of himself. He's more recluse, but Ryo sort of has the ability to see that he's talented in driving, and he's quite quick on his feet, and that there is potential there for him to be a good street racer. So yeah, Hiroshi definitely looks up to Ryu as his older brother, and he sees his older brother as sort of the thing that he always wants to be. But he's also in need of guidance from Ryo and also the player as well. So I guess that's kind of who they are as people. Their backstory is still quite ambiguous. You don't really know where they came from, but you know that they have sort of a history in racing, especially with Ryo. But who knows what will happen to them in the future?
We'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Absolutely.
And Darren, you also like you and Matt kind of created these characters together. Could you kind of talk about like how that worked with you two, like bringing these characters to life?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, originally Matt came up with the whole backstory and their relationship and everything, and I read through it, and it was fantastic. And Matt had collected a whole bunch of references and had defined who they were. And originally they weren't of Asian descent, but I felt like they certainly could be. And I thought, based on the essence of these characters, I kind of thought of them as almost a pastiche of some cousins I have. So there's this intimacy of the subject matter that I was kind of excited to be able to use. So, given EA's push towards like the greater inclusiveness that they're doing, and the current sort of spate of anti-Asian attacks and hostility in the wake of COVID and all that, I thought I'd broach the question to Matt. Could they potentially be Asian brothers, just to give a little bit more visibility. My thought was that we could let this segment of the greater population know who are hurting at the moment, and has traditionally underreported racial harassment. We see you, you're important to us. And it was an opportunity to highlight that people from different backgrounds also share a lot of similarities. And, this was the first time working with Matt on a main event. And yeah, he was really fantastic. He was really supportive and he flowed with it. And he just adjusted everything in sort of new direction. So as I said, I kind of based who they were largely on what Matt had sort of described, as well as various people from my own past, and also healthy amount of other research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've done some really awesome stuff here on Need for Speed and some of our other titles here at Fire Monkeys with diversity and inclusion. And I know, we never want to do something just to kind of jump on a bandwagon or anything. And I think like a lot of the stuff that we do here is reflective of both, the people in the studio. We're an extremely diverse studio. Our players are, we're a worldwide game. We've got, a lot of players from all over, from east and west and north and south, just everywhere. So then, as you guys are kind of working together, Matt and Darren, like Darren, so you're a first generation Asian Australian. And I was just wondering like how, in terms of, you kind of mentioned the Asian hate and stuff has kind of been in the news lately. And we're obviously very aware of that. So, how has that kind of informed like the creation of these characters? And, do you mind kind of just talking a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I came to Australia when I was about 5, in the early 80s. And I remember, one of the things when we landed was like, wow, everything's so big, big spaces, like everything was so spread out. Because I originally came from Singapore and everything was very built upwards. So yeah, everything was so spread out, big spaces, the food portions were a lot bigger. Even the people were bigger. Like I was pretty small compared to everyone else. And it's like, wow, everyone's huge. So growing up, honestly, I was reflecting on the other day, and I had a pretty good time growing up. I'll be honest, I didn't experience a lot of overt racism, and I think that's potentially because Australia is a bit of a melting pot. At times I was called various not so nice names a few times, but that was in the minority. Overall, it was a net positive experience with some caveats. There were certain parts of my culture that it felt like we suppressed for various reasons. One of them would just be, I'd hide my lunch at school because people were like, ew, what's that? So I wouldn't eat that stuff at school, or I'd eat it somewhere else where no one would kind of see it. And, this was in Australia in the 80s. And at the time there weren't that many Asian people around that I knew. So it was a little bit exotic, a little bit, out there for a lot of people. So yeah, we just weren't used to that diversity in that sort of area yet. Also, I have like a Christian and Chinese name, as a lot of Chinese descent people do, and I've only ever used my Christian name. Like my Chinese name is Yao Zilong, which means like little dragon, which is pretty cool. But I've never actually used it as my name. Like I've never said I'm I'm this person. Much of the reasoning behind that was practicality. It was just easier to say for my teachers and my schoolmates. I think it was just, yeah. And even then, like, people would get Darren wrong all the time. So I was like, well,
yeah. You can't win. Right.
Okay. So yeah, you know, my caveat to my childhood being mostly a really positive experience in Australia was that I was really good at blending in. I am really good at blending in with the pervasive culture. And at the time it was Caucasian. Everyone around me is basically Caucasian. So I was really good at, you know, playing Westerner. So I can only guess that, you know, I felt pretty included in most things because I think everyone around me just kind of looked at me as, you know, he's basically just one of the kids. He might look a little bit different, but not in any terribly obvious ways. So, you know, in many ways, I feel like more Caucasian than Asian. And I think that's actually something that I'd actually like to address. You know, even today, my wife, she's Caucasian, and she often says that she's more Asian than me, because she's very in tune with cultures, not just Asian culture, but a lot of other cultures as well. She does the legwork to kind of understand, like, you know, things like celebrations and that sort of thing, and the reasoning behind things. And it's a bit of a running joke, but there is, you know, it's something that I've been slowly interested in changing, and I really credit EA with a lot of that. The EIGs have been really eye-opening. So yeah, one of the things that I did for this event, and I was doing it before as well, was I would travel virtually with VR. You can go on YouTube and a bunch of other places where you can travel around the world and kind of, you know, people have used, I think they call them stereoscopic cameras. And so it's almost like you're there. And so for this event, I actually went to Shinjuku in Japan. And it was almost this very voyeuristic look at this place, and just seeing all the neon lights and all the aspects and all the components that are all, you know, jammed together. And you can see the people walking by. And for me, some of that was, it was important because I'd ask myself, with the characters that I'm creating, would they sort of be able to fit in this environment? Because I was essentially trying to replicate the look of this place. And yeah, I tried to reflect that in Ryo's clothing, and, you know, asked if they would just fit in. So, and I think the other thing as well was, you know, you asked how my experiences growing up and being part of the Asian culture in some ways reflected on these characters. And I'd say probably in fairly subtle ways. It wasn't any one single detail that I would say, yeah, it specifically led to this. It was more, the creative process is inaccurate, and I liken it a bit like, you know, an archaeologist kind of digging around in the sand trying to find what feels right. And I think a lot of what feels right depends on my experiences with my family and being part of Asian culture in some ways. So that was, you know, that's my very roundabout way of how that affected the character designs.
Yeah, wow. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And yeah, I think, you know, as we you know, here, we see all these things going on around the world. And I think, you know, we look to just, you know, how does that reflect to, you know, us, you know, as a studio or as a team, as a game team? And then, you know, how does that also reflect, you know, to our players? Because I said, like, you know, extremely diverse player base as well. So what I really like about Need for Speed No Limits, and I think that this team does really well, is, you know, we have a super diverse in Need for Speed No Limits universe, you know, cast of characters, which is really awesome as well. And I think everyone does a really great job of, you know, leaning on each other, whether it's, you know, the Asian characters and Matt and Darren working together, or, you know, when we did the Women's History Month raps, you know, I know, Darren, you worked with Alana and some of our other, you know, female women that not female women, some of the other women that work on the game and in the studio and stuff. And, you know, Need for Speed has a really rich history of having a diverse you know, group of people working on it. And one of the things we failed to mention in our Women's History Month roundtable was that, our first designer for Need for Speed No Limits, our lead designer was a woman. So, a lot of the base of the entire game is, from her. So that's, something we really pride ourselves on.
I had no idea that's really interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, it's something we want to revisit at a later date, because I think there's a lot of really cool history of like Need for Speed No Limits that players aren't aware of. But yeah, I'd like to get into that a little bit more at some point. But yeah, I think, final thoughts on this update. Alana, what are you looking forward to most? What do you want to see?
I'm excited to see the players' reaction to the new storyline. I think it's a really good opportunity for new players to jump in who haven't played the game before to try this new storyline, but also gives something extra to our loyal older players and a new story arc. So it's always exciting to see the player theories. I love the Gary evolution videos and those. So I'd love to see what players think will happen with the evolution of Ryo and Hiroshi.
Matt, were you excited? Were you stoked to have players like dive into?
I just can't wait to see the art, finally in game and live. I think Darren's done an incredible job sort of taking my initial vision. And, as a designer, we really lean on artists a lot of the times to bring our visions to life. And I remember when Darren was like sort of sharing me the character concepts that he'd have back and forth, he sent me one like, that's it, perfect, that's awesome. And he's like, I'm not even done yet, like 3/4 of the way through. And he sent me another one like, that's even better. And it just got better and better and better. So the two characters, Ryo and Hiroshi, are exactly as I would imagine them. So I can't wait to see them in game and to see players' reaction to them.
I think Matt's just easy to please. I'm like, is this? And he's like, yeah, that's awesome. And I'm like, you sure?
Yeah.
That's the best coworker to have.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I'm easily impressed for sure.
Yeah, it's like Matt's my favorite designer now.
What about you, Darren? What are you stoked for players to check out?
I think the wrap, like I really enjoyed working on that wrap, and it's a black and white one, so you can change the colors and use all sorts of different finishes on the car. And there are some that I designed it with a certain color scheme in mind, but when you jump in there and you start playing around with all the different colors, it's like, wow, you can get some really cool effects. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, look, hey, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. And, players, super excited to jump into this. Hopefully you join us for our next episode. We're looking to do one of these basically one every update. So, if there's any particular insights that you would like to see, hit us up on Twitter. We're happy to look into that. And we've got a lot more awesome stuff. Need for Speed No Limits has an impressive year ahead of it. So we can't wait to share that stuff with you. Once again, thanks to my guests for coming on and sharing that stuff. Really, really appreciate it. And everyone else, I guess we will see you on the streets.